Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Birds. Today, we are back with some more fantasy football 2023. The season is about to start. We're getting this content out. Today, I have 5 sleepers that I love drafting based on where they're going at ADP right now in drafts. But let's not waste your time. Let's hop into my 5 sleepers heading in to 2023 fantasy football. Right before we start, all of these guys are going at pick 100 or later in drafts. Obviously, ADP is going to change as we get closer to the season, but right now, these guys are going very late in drafts, and I love taking them at a huge discount. First guy on my list is going to be Elijah Mitchell, the running back for the San Francisco 49ers. There's no secret, Mitchell is the number 2 running back in San Francisco behind Christian McCaffrey. He's their guy. They traded for him last year, and he does very well for them at the end of last season. However, Mitchell is going to be a factor in this offense, and as the clear number 1 handcuff in fantasy football, in my opinion, now that Alexander Mattison and Tony Pollard have emerged as their own lead backs in their backfield, Mitchell at ADP of 123 is way too late for a guy who has such a high ceiling if McCaffrey is to go down with injury. Let's be honest, McCaffrey's injury history does create room for some serious concern for McCaffrey owners drafting him in the first round, but Mitchell, getting him this late on a guy who's going to factor into this backfield, even with McCaffrey healthy, he's going to have a large role in this offense alongside McCaffrey. Obviously not the lead back like we talked about, but last year in games that Mitchell and McCaffrey played in, Mitchell's still getting 6 yards per carry, which is phenomenal efficiency, and overall 60 yards per game on average in rushing production from Mitchell. And this is no surprise. The year before last, when Mitchell broke out in fantasy football, he was a top 10 running back in not only rushing efficiency, but also fantasy points per touch given in his backfield. So Mitchell's proven he doesn't need that many touches to be a sustainable and reliable piece in fantasy football. And that's what he's going to be in San Francisco. We know touches are so valuable under Shanahan, such a great offensive scheme. Any sort of volume for the 49ers, you're going to have some pretty solid fantasy numbers. So going at the number 123 average draft position, this is way too late for a guy who has league-winning upside at the end of your drafts, given his elite handcuff ability to go along with his flex appeal on a given week in this San Francisco offense. Not only do all McCaffrey owners need to be owning Mitchell in the late rounds, but if you want to grab him as a late-round piece, I am more than happy to do that. In addition, if Brock Purdy or Sam Darnold is to win the starting job heading into week 1, this is going to open up so much more room for these guys in the backfield like McCaffrey and Mitchell to get more production. Guy like Trey Lance, he's going to vulture a lot of that rushing opportunity inside the red zone. So if you get these more stable pocket passing quarterbacks like Darnold or Purdy to be the starter, I really like Mitchell, especially right now where he's going in drafts. My second sleeper is going to be Antonio Gibson, maybe one of the most polarizing figures in fantasy football. Right now, his average draft position is the number 34 running back off the board. But this makes no sense to me. Last year, he finished as the number 27 running back. And this year, it looks like a much clearer picture for the Commanders' backfield. J.D. McKissic no longer on this team. He was controlling nearly 6 targets per game out of that backfield for the Commanders. So with McKissic gone, those targets are now available to Gibson, who already had 40 receptions in each of his first 2 seasons. So he's already proven to be that receiving back out of the backfield on third downs. And now that that role is completely his, I don't understand why he's going around pick 100 in drafts. Now, he's not going to control a lot of the volume on the ground. That's going to be Brian Robinson. But Robinson, coming off that injury last year, he did not look that great. I mean, on this season, he's under 4 yards per carry. Pretty poor efficiency numbers, but we got to realize the offense in Washington was pretty abysmal, and Gibson himself didn't have that great of a yards per carry mark, so I can't hold that against Robinson. But with a guy who didn't show that much elusiveness in year 1, I don't mind taking a flyer on Gibson, especially where he's going in drafts, where he's going to be a value as long as he stays healthy. Alongside his role being very clear in Washington, he also gets a new offensive coordinator, Eric Bieniemy, from the Kansas City Chiefs. We know how Bieniemy and Andy Reid likes to use their guys out of the backfield. Pacheco, that more ground and pound type running back, that's the Brian Robinson in this offense. But we saw Jerick McKinnon be very profitable in fantasy leagues and actually win fantasy leagues down the stretch in 2022. That receiving role alongside Patrick Mahomes, obviously a very profitable position for him. I'm not saying Gibson and Sam Howell are going to have that connection, but Gibson should have more of a role than McKissic had. And if he can provide any sort of numbers resembling those in Washington with offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy, I love slamming Gibson in the late round to be your RB3 or 4. Provide a very stable floor, especially in PPR leagues. Gibson's an absolute steal where he's going. Also, with a quarterback like Sam Howell, not going to be a lot of upside there. No clear picture of what the quarterback situation is going to look like. Sam Howell, unproven coming into year 2. So he could lean on the running backs out of the backfield. The dump offs to Gibson could be very profitable. like we've already seen in his rookie and sophomore year. A very great pass catching back, which, like I said, is going to provide that such a high floor for Gibson. Maybe the ceiling's not there because the offense is going to be limited this year, but a high floor guy you're getting around pick 100. I love slamming Gibson in the late rounds. My first wide receiver sleeper is going to be Nico Collins, the wideout for the Houston Texans. Not a very sexy pick here. Collins not going to provide any league-winning upside where he's going in drafts, but he's so cheap. You're getting him so late for a guy who could be the leading target share receiver on his team for an offense that could be on the rise. I think this is a no-brainer pick when you get that far deep in drafts. Collins actually showed a little bit of upside last season with Davis Mills. In 9 healthy games that Collins played and finished, he's getting about 7 targets a game with 4 catches and around 50 receiving yards on a per-game basis. Obviously, these numbers aren't going to blow you out of the water or anything, but right now his current ADP is 154. This is absurdly low for a guy who has that ability to be the number 1 guy on his team. Last season, the target numbers weren't too bad. A 20% team target share for Collins last season. It's a pretty impressive number considering 50% of Collins' targets were deemed uncatchable from Davis Mills. Now, I bring that percentage up because the new quarterback, CJ Stroud, that the Houston Texans go out and grab in the top 5 of the draft. His strength is going to be his accuracy. One of the most accurate quarterbacks at the collegiate level, bringing that to the National Football League. A lot more targets are going to be catchable for Collins. If he can provide any sort of fantasy stability at pick 154, you're going to be very happy with this selection. Texans do bring in a rookie wide receiver and do get John Mechie out after sitting out a year. But after missing Brandon Cooks, the target opportunity is completely wide open for this Texans team. Dalton Schultz is going to be a factor in this offense, but at the wide receiver position, you can take your pick on who you think's going to be that wide receiver 1. For a guy who had a 20% team target share, I'll bet on Nico Collins this late in drafts. I think it's an absolute no-brainer with an accurate quarterback coming into Houston to be that facilitator in this offense. For a quarterback who doesn't like to run as much and extend plays, he likes to get the ball out of his hands. I think Nico Collins at 154 is a great sleeper pick in 2023 drafts. My next wide receiver sleeper is going to be Rondale Moore, the 3rd-year wideout for the Arizona Cardinals. Now, a lot of this is going to be from the opportunity that Rondale is going to have this upcoming season. The situation in Arizona does not look pretty. I'll be the first to admit that. Kyler Murray is going to sit out a majority of the season, if not all of the season, so the quarterback play is going to be bottom of the league. However, I think there's a huge opportunity for Moore to establish himself as the number 2, if not the number 1 wide receiver in Arizona. Last year, Rondale was playing 95% of the snaps when healthy. This could change with the new coaching regime coming in, but still, for a talented guy out of Purdue, I think they're going to lean on Rondale to make some plays out of the slot and close to the line of scrimmage. Backfield doesn't look great in Arizona. James Conner, an aging running back. But for a guy in Moore who's playing nearly 95% of the snaps last year, getting nearly 8 targets a game out of that offense, and during a 4-game stretch where Rondale was fully healthy, he was actually a top 15 wide receiver. A very small sample size for Moore, but he wasn't healthy for a majority of the season. He came in with the injury and then gets injured late. So a top 15 wide receiver during this 4-game stretch gives me a reason to be optimistic for Rondale. Yet again, another guy going past pick 100 in drafts. Cardinals have already released DeAndre Hopkins. That's going to open up a ton of targets in this offense. Hollywood Brown looks to be that number 1 guy for them, but he's already having injury problems in the offseason. And he's a guy who's proven that he can't stay healthy for a full season in the NFL. I think this is a great flyer pick for a team that's going to be trailing in a majority of their games. They're bottom 3 in win total projected from the Vegas sports books. So they're going to be trailing and looking to air it out in garbage time. I think this is a very profitable formula for a guy going this late in drafts to be a wide receiver 2 in PPR leagues who could provide some flex appeal down the stretch in your season. So I'm definitely looking to grab Rondale if I can late in drafts as a flyer flex play for this Arizona Cardinals team that's going to rely on its playmakers on the outside, since the quarterback play is not going to be at the level it has been with Kyler Murray the past couple of seasons when he's been healthy. My last sleeper on this list is going to be Samaje Perine, running back for now the Denver Broncos. Sean Payton brings him over from Cincinnati to back up Javonte Williams. However, we don't necessarily know that he's going to be the backup running back in week 1. Reports on Javonte don't look as good as we initially thought. Not only does he tear that ACL, but he's also got 2 other ligament damages in that knee, so it's a pretty serious knee injury that he's coming off of. This reminds me a lot of J.K. Dobbins last season when everyone was pointing the fingers that he was going to be healthy coming into week 1, and he was saying himself he was going to play week 1, and then his injury just lingers throughout the season. He gets pushed back and re-injures it. I can see this happening with Javonte this upcoming year for such a devastating knee injury. Broncos not only bring Perine over, but they also give him a very sizable backup running back contract. I think 2 years, $7 million. This is pretty good numbers for a guy projected to be a backup running back. So they expect him to play a good amount in this offense. And Sean Payton has been very favorable to his running backs in fantasy. The last 5 seasons he's been in New Orleans, he's had top 5 productions at the running back position, spread out between Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram, Latavius Murray. He likes to lean on these running backs out of the backfield and in the ground in the red zone. Obviously, that's going to be a lot easier to do when you have Alvin Kamara as your lead back. But still, even before Kamara was in New Orleans, he was leaning on these running backs in the screen game to provide change of paces on this defense. Peyton's always been a guy relying on his running backs, and I expect that not to change coming up in Denver for a team that did struggle last season when their running backs went down and that offensive line was so abysmal. If Javonte is to miss any portion of the regular season to start off the year, Perine's going to step into that role and really be all by himself. I think we can expect to rely on him if given that starting role, because we saw it last season in Cincinnati when Joe Mixon went down with injury. Perine stepped into that role and had a very profitable run during a 3-game stretch where he was the lead back. In this 3-game stretch, he's getting 6 targets a game and over 15 carries per game. So 21 touches coming for Perine in this stretch. Not only that, he's also turning that into fantasy points, 23 fantasy points per game in this 3-game stretch in Cincinnati. Now, obviously, we're going to expect Cincinnati's running back to be a lot more efficient in his touches than a guy coming into Denver's offense, what we project this upcoming season. But still, we don't need him to be a 20 points per game guy if given this leading role where you're getting him in drafts. Whether or not Javonte plays week 1, he's not going to have that full workload, so Perine's going to factor into this backfield and get at least a sizable role. So grabbing Perine late, I think, is a no-brainer pick, especially if you have any confidence in Sean Payton to turn this around in Denver. If this offense can get it going with Russell Wilson, Jerry Jeudy, and Perine, I think you could be looking at a top 15 running back that you get past pick 100 in your drafts. So I'm very okay with drafting Perine after I get my top guys early in the draft at the running back position. But that's all I got today. Those are my 5 sleepers heading into 2023 at current average draft position. I think you can get all these guys at very discounted prices and could be steals this upcoming season in 2023. Let me know what you think of these 5 sleepers, if you agree or disagree. Love hearing your guys' opinions, and drop a comment and a like. I would really appreciate it. Love talking fantasy with you guys. But that's going to wrap it up. We appreciate you watching, and we'll see you guys next week with another episode of the Fantasy Birds.